Okay, so part two of our tutorial, looking at how we're going to make this rifle. If you remember, we were looking at an image, which was this one. And I was just discussing how we were going to go about making this as part of a set of tutorials. And what we've done so far from the previous tutorial is we've loaded this image in and we've made a basic shape for our gun. And what we're also going to do here, because this is max 9 and because we can, I'm going to use hidden line. And that's going to be quite nice. I quite like hidden line. There you go, you see that looks all very funky when we look at that. Now, continuing from where we left off, we just turned our lathe into a revolve and then converted that into an edit poly. And what I'm going to do now is, really, if I just, I'm going to cheat a little bit. Actually, let's just hide selection. I'm just going to put in these little areas here, here, here. Just these little grooves that go to make up the a little bit more detail within the rifle. You can see here that I've done exactly that on this one. It doesn't show up so much with the glass, but you can certainly see that the detail is there. And if this was a solid render and we'd spent time and effort making correct textures, then they would obviously, that extra little bit of detail in there would show up a lot better. So let's unhide all for the moment and select our object. And I'm going to use some of the features that were introduced into Max 8 that make life a lot easier. So I've selected all of these. I've just marquee selected. I made sure that obviously I didn't have ignore backface switched on. And I'm going to open up the dialog for connect edges. You can see here one edge is now connected, all of those. And I really want what 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll have 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, there you go, and you can see I can slide these along, I can squash them together, I can do, it's just great, this, I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's one of the best features that was put into Max. And I can make life a lot easier for myself just by dragging each one of these along to roughly line up with the holes that I'm interested in. There we go. Now, you might notice here that I've just created one set of lines, and there is a very good reason for that. And that is because if we come to edges, if I now say chamfer, I can now ignoring this one obviously, I can interactively chamfer my selections here. Of course, it would help if I didn't keep picking the wrong edges. So let's go back and let's just make sure that we select only the right edges that we want. There we go, and we'll loop those. Okay, and I'll use, just to be on the safe side, I'll use the chamfer dialog. Now something's gone drastically wrong there, so let me just cancel this process. Ah, and there you go. There'll be the problem. Here you go. This is one of the fun things when you do teaching, is that things do have a nasty tendency to go horribly awry when you don't want them to. So there we go. That's just corrected that error. It was a silly mistake to make. I'd obviously just not been paying attention when I was selecting all my edges. I've moved something that shouldn't have been moved. So we've corrected that error now. We'll make a loop. Yeah, there we go. They're all looped correctly. I'll chamfer those. I think that was fine, wasn't it? Yes. So again, doesn't matter if they're not entirely all looped together. And I'm working with vertices at the moment because I don't want to spoil my edge selection. And that will become apparent as to why in a second. Okay, so if I come back to edges, again, one of the beauties of doing these as live podcasts is, of course, you have to make sure that you don't make so many mistakes. There we go. Let's just move these again now. Okay. Obviously, if I was doing this on a proper video, I would have edited that bit out. Which I may still do. You never know. If it stays in, then you'll know that I couldn't have been bothered to edit it. Okay, let's just come back here and let's just check. Yeah, okay, that's cool. Now, never works when you want it to. What I can do here is I can select two edges. I can press loop, which just selects these two, and by pressing shift and the polygon tool, I select all the polygons that are in between those two edges, which is great because what I can now do is I can now do an extrude on those, and I can just come down in very, very slightly within that, and that all looks really cool. So we can now start to do this all over the model, all over these edges. So I select my two edges, or the two segments on the edge loop. I select the edge loop. I'm pressing shift and the polygon key. I now select all of the faces within that edge loop. And by using the extrude settings rather, it remembers the settings that I had before and simply reapplies them. So I'm really not spending an awful lot of time doing this if I really don't have to. Now, you may say, why didn't I do all those edges at the same time? Well, you may have noticed when I was doing that 3D Studio didn't select everything that I wanted to. It got a little bit confused as to what it was supposed to be selecting and what it wasn't supposed to be selecting. So it's always best to edges, shift, there we go. It's always best just to kind of do things almost one by one. And there we go. If I now come to F3, and what I quite like doing with my models as well is I'll just put a grey default texture on there. There we go. You can see that we're starting to build up quite a bit of detail in there, and it's starting to look quite cool. There's our hidden line. That's beginning to look really, really nice. And all I'm really going to do is I'm going to repeat that process further along the barrel. So let's see. I think probably we'll do it twice more here. So we'll say connect. I don't want 5, I want 2. I'll OK that. Take my vertices, drag these vertices so they go into some kind of cohesive line there. Go back to edges. Obviously 3D Studio Max has remembered our edges. I'm going to go to chamfer, click OK. Now again, because we've got two edges here and two edges here, 3D Studio, this is where it gets confused, is it doesn't know that it's supposed to only get the two edges there and the segments here. It gets confused because there's an edge there and an edge there. And it's saying, well, if I want to select all the polygons in between, I'm going to select these as well. So not massively helpful. What I can always do is change my selection type to inclusive, or so that the marquee tool has to select all the polygons, and then just press Control, not Shift, and then go back to Extrude, and obviously Extrude has remembered my settings. So the next thing for us to do, if I come back into 3D view, is to just check in the center here that clump of vertices and just collapse those into one. And just to make doubly sure, I'm going to select that little, and you can see there they're not all quite together. I'm just going to collapse those. So that's brilliant. And the next thing left for me to do is I'm going to create a cylinder, and I'm going to Boolean down all the way down so this becomes hollow. So at the moment we've got a solid object, and what I want to do is I want to create a hollow. So right click in the center of our viewports, reset the layout there, and I'm kind of guessing that this inner circle here is going to be this edge there, and we'll confirm that with a, maybe we won't. Just make a cylinder then. I think the other thing we need to do with this as well, I was going to say move it into the center, but in actual fact if I do that I'll knock this all out of alignment. Mind you, I suppose I could always put it back later. That's the point. So I'll tell you what, we'll do that then. We'll make our pivot just pivot. We're going to now center the pivot to the center of the object, align it to the world. If I right click on my select and move, and then I right click on each one of these spinners, you can see this is now in the center of the world. It's completely offset from my drawing, but what I can always do is I can move it back to there, to the drawing later on. And the reason why we're going to do this is because I'm going to create a cylinder about yay big, and there we go. And I think my height sequence, I'll make that 12, maybe 14. And again, I want to match the number of sides on my cylinder, so I'm going to make it 42. So I now have a cylinder that intersects the main body of my my sniper scope. And all I'm going to do is right click on the outer part of that. I'm going to go to my geometry, create, compound objects, pro boolean, and literally just start picking. Oh, there we go. Bosh, job done. Right click on that and convert it to an edit poly.